very brief. Kau buka dengan Al-Fatihah. Ya. Buka dengan Al-Fatihah. How do I know what is being shown? I'll asking yes. Macam dia duduk sini kot. Ni kamera. Kat sini lah kot. Kat situ rasa tak nampak. Tak nampak. So you want me to stand here? Oh, tak nampak. Kalau kat sini betul lah. I can see the screen from here. Betul? From this angle lama. This angle boleh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kita buka majlis dengan kita Al-Fatihah. Alhamdulillah, hari ini kita ada tetamu istimewa dari Malaysia untuk sama-sama berkongsi tajuk The Kindest Miracle Make Your Marriage Work. Akan disampaikan oleh Puan Jamilah Samian. So saya nanti Puan Jamilah akan introduce yourself. Okay. So saya serahkan majlis kepada Jamilah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak-banyak Dr. Wan Mai yang sudi to host this program, as well as pihak Ikram London. Is that correct? Yeah, Ikram London. And I'm truly honored and privileged today for all of you who are here, Dr. Nur Aliza, Sister Haslina, right? Sister Haslina, as well as Nadia. Thank you very much for being here. And inshallah, we shall start with making a short dua by ourselves, a very private dua that although the time that we are going to spend is very short, I really hope that this is going to help you to progress further. If you are single, hopefully it will paint a more positive view of marriage, depending on whatever you have heard. You know, maybe you have heard that marriage is not good for you, or it's something that could turn negative. So I do really hope that it will paint a picture of more hope, more positive than negative. All right. Now, a little bit about myself. I have been married for almost 31 years to Brother Ahmad Fakri Hamzah, who is not here today. And normally we run this workshop or seminar together as a couple. The Kindest Miracle, which I'm going to talk about today, is actually based on my latest book, which is my 4th book. And I'm going to tell you a bit more as we go along why I have written this book, right? So we have, let me introduce to you a little bit about my family. Yeah, a bit of ta'aruf there. My eldest child is already going to be 30 years old. Yeah, and he and his lovely wife has a baby who is about 1 year old. So that is Saif and Nazira, both of them are engineers. They are currently in America because Nazira is doing her PhD, right? And my second child is Ahmad Salahuddin. He and his wife, they are in Malaysia. And they have opened a physiotherapy clinic, which they manage and run by themselves. And this is my third child, Alia and Izzat. Izzat is her husband, my son-in-law. Both of them are doctors. And Izzat is currently doing his housemanship. And the last three are my sons, Safi, Sharif, and Siraj. And Siraj is, the youngest is about 16 years old. Now that's about a very brief introduction of me and my family. Now, as a warm-up activity for this morning, can I ask that you greet your neighbors? But you have already greeted your neighbors, right? This is a very small, crowd. Maybe it would be good for you to actually discuss amongst yourselves for a very short time. What act of kindness have you experienced? We'll make it very short, less than 1 minute. Is that possible? Just to discuss can you recall any act of kindness that you have experienced? Any form of kindness before we actually dive into kindness in marriage itself. All right? So perhaps Nadia, you can turn back and discuss with the rest of the 30 seconds. Is that enough? Okay, anybody would like to share? Maybe 1% from the group? You don't have any, you don't have anything that you want to share? You can't think of anything. Well,
when was the last time?
Kak Alice and me actually were treated to not one act of kindness, probably many last night many acts of kindness, because we were invited to Sister Hasina's house and she actually treated us to a feast. I think that was really, a grand act of kindness. So thumbs up to Sister Hasina and her family. Now I want to really begin this session by telling you a story about two sahabas. In fact, they were a husband and wife pair, and this is the story of Sulaim and Abu Talha. So perhaps you have actually heard of this story, but it doesn't hurt for us to actually recount this story again and again, because there is always something about stories that have actually happened from good people that we know, and even good people that we don't really know personally, but these are the people who have personified kindness and the kind of marriage that we really would like to emulate. Now back to this story. This actually happened to Sulaim and Abu Talha. Sulaim and Abu Talha were married, and they had a son. They had a son whom Abu Talha loved very much. All right. Sulaim knew that Abu Talha was very fond of this little boy. And one day, this boy fell ill and passed away. So when Abu Talha came home, the first question that he asked Sulaim was, "Where's the boy?" And before that, actually Sulaim has already requested her family members and the family members of Abu Talha not to mention the boy's death to Abu Talha. She told them that she was going to break the news to Abu Talha herself. So when Abu Talha asked her what happened to the boy, Sulaim specifically said that from the time she was ill until now, from the time he was ill until now, he has never been as calm as he is now. Now, it's very important for us to realize that this is actually not a lie, because when she said that, she was trying to compare the time when when the baby was ill, when the boy was ill, compared to the time when death overtook him, right? So we believe that with the death, he was at a better place. The boy was at a better place, but Abu Talha took it to mean that the boy was actually better. He wasn't as ill as he was before. Now that night, Sulaim beautified herself and they spent together as time as husband and wife. And after that, Sulaim actually asked Abu Talha a question. She asked, what would you think if somebody were to borrow something from another person but refused to return what he borrowed? Abu Talha said that wouldn't be the right thing, because whatever we have borrowed from somebody else, we would have to return it back. Now, Sulaim said, your son was led to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he has taken him back. Now, when Abu Talha realized that his son actually passed away, he was upset, but after a while he accepted that it was, that was a decree from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the point that I want to mention, that I want to stress here, emphasize here, is look at how Sulaim as a wife, as a mother, how she actually dealt with that situation. I mean, if we were to put ourselves in her shoes, imagine, you know, for those of us who haven't married, who have children, who actually bore our babies for 9 months, we know the degree of attachment, the very strong attachment that we have with our children. And I honestly, to be honest with you, I could not imagine, or I would say it would be extremely difficult for me to stay as calm as Sulaim did. But at the same time, when we look at this exemplary behavior, we could see that yes, it is possible that if we were to really pause and step back, it is very possible for us to actually balance our emotions and not allow it to overcome our brain. Because Sulaim knew that that piece of news would have upset Abu Talha very much. Yet she did what she thought was the right thing to do to calm him down, right? So one of the things that I'm going to elaborate afterwards is how sometimes our emotions can actually push us into doing things that actually put our marriage in a predicament, especially for us women, because I know that, I'm not saying that women tend to be very emotional, but there is that tendency amongst us women to be ruled by our heart rather than our mind, inshallah. I see somebody smiling there. Right? Now, why did I write this book? This is the book that I wrote, The Kindness Miracle, which has just been published less than a year ago, just some months back. This is something that became a personal mission to me. Let me tell you the background story of this book. Quite a number of years ago, many years ago, when I was still a young mother, now I'm a grandmother. I have 3 grandkids actually, 2 girls and 1 boy. When I was a much younger mother, I was sitting together with one of my neighbors. This neighbor of mine she was about middle age, in her 50s probably. And as we were sitting together, we saw this young couple, newly married couple who had just moved nearby in our neighborhood. And when I saw the couple walk in front of me, I just got, I mean, that feeling when you see a newly married couple passing by, they were, they looked very loving and holding hands. And I said something like, wow, isn't that wonderful? A newly married couple walking together full of love towards each other. But what my neighbor said actually shocked me, because out of the blue, she said, you know what, at my age, I wouldn't want even to think of the word love. Now that really surprised me, because I was wondering, would I have the same attitude like her when I was her age, as in now, you know. And we all know, I'm sure a lot of you out there, you have seen how, even it might be your parents, your uncles or aunts, or even your neighbors who have reached their even late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, who once upon a time, the husband and the wife, they might have been very much in love with one another, but over the years, the relationship developed into something else. You know, it's more like a marriage of convenience where the husband will do certain things and the husband will do other things. And sometimes it might look like as though their lives is working on a clockwork, like clockwork. It's just too perfect. Except that the spark is no longer there. There is no attraction. There is no warmth. You know, even sometimes you could hear the husband and the wife throwing snide remarks or cynical remarks towards each other. Now, the thing is that would we want that kind of marriage or would we want something better? The way I understand it, if we were to look back at our Prophet Rasulullah SAW, it's not the kind of marriage that he had with his wives, particularly that between him and Aisha. The Prophet ﷺ had a very special name for Aisha, right? And what was that? Humaira, right? What does Humaira mean? Pipi yang kemerah-merahan. In Malay, we say that it is pipi yang kemerah-merahan. And that is a very special name, a pet name that the Prophet reserved for her. And to me, that actually signifies that when you are married, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. It is actually possible, very possible for the husband and the wife to be very loving and to have a very special relationship that they can really enjoy and appreciate. You know, it's not just because we know a lot of people who don't have such a relationship doesn't mean that we cannot develop one, we cannot grow one. Now, the incident between me and my neighbor actually happened many years ago. And many years later, I met somebody, a close friend of mine, a good friend of mine. The last time I met her before that was when she was single. She was about to be married in a different town. And then many years passed and I met her again. And this time I found out she was already married. But the sad thing was that she had 3 children, she had grown-up children, 3 grown-up children, but she was divorced. Now you could say, so what? Because a lot of people actually get married and divorced, especially these days. We all know that the figures are rising, right? Everywhere around the world and even amongst Muslims. Now, I wasn't too shocked about her getting divorced. What shocked me was the situation, the environment, and the goings on that led to the divorce. And after that, I found out that after the divorce, the husband actually took the kids away, the 3 kids, when they were very young. And not only he took the kids away, he kept them away from her for several years. So she was actually trying to find her kids. And several years later, she found out that the husband and the kids were just living a few kilometers away from her. So when I heard of that story, I really wondered what actually caused that, you know? Because they were very much in love with each other before they got married. How could that love develop into hatred, such deep hatred for each other? Yeah? Because in many cases in divorce that actually happened. Now, we all know that dating and all that is not, you know, it's really not encouraged in Islam, but we're not going to stay in that. The thing is that they were married and it was, you know, the husband and wife, they chose each other, not the parents. So you cannot say that it's a matter of the parents match making them, not at all. It was their own choice. The spouses were their own spouse. So it was their own choice. So you can imagine how, yeah? There is no, I mean, it was just shocking to me to hear what happened to her. So when I heard what happened to her, it became something that it became a very personal thing to me, because I told myself that I couldn't really help her at that time. But I thought maybe if I write a book on that and I do some research, then perhaps there would be some light along the tunnel for people who we are more into proactive ways of helping people not to go through that route. I mean, a heartbreak and divorce and all that. Okay, because to me it doesn't really happen overnight. Certain things must have happened over the years that actually pushed them into that kind of relationship, such a negative kind of relationship. So those are the two reasons why I wrote this book. And of course, personally, I also don't want myself to fall into a marriage where in Malay we call it hambar. There's no spark, no positivity in the marriage after so many years. Yeah. If we look at the Quran, what Allah says about marriage in Surah Ar-Rum ayat 21, translated. And among his signs is that he created mates for you from yourselves, that you may find comfort and repose in them, and he put between you love. The word used here is mawaddah and compassion, rahmah. Mawaddah wa rahmah. And to me, this is a very important evidence that proves that yes, there should be love and compassion in a marriage. And you don't have to be 21 to have it in your marriage. You could be 50s, you could be in your 60s, 70s, and it should still be there if you do it correctly, right? So that was how I set my journey, and there was a lot of research. I was kind of overwhelmed with what I found in terms of research, but at the end of the day, I'm here to tell you that there are good news, all right? What we are talking about now is actually love within the context of a marriage. This is just one of the studies that I discovered about love in marriage, where we say, okay, why do we use the word romantic love? There are many different kinds of love. As a parent, we love our children. That's parental love, okay? But when you are married, it's what we call romantic love. It's a different kind of love. Now, marriage and romantic love, this is just one example of a study that was made. Does a long-term relationship kill romantic love? What is the issue here? This was done by the Western researchers, okay, at Stony Brook University, because we all know about this phenomenon of cohabitating, right? Cohabitating, men and women staying together without being married. Now, the issue is, after you have fallen in love with each other, you stay together, okay, you get married. So what's the point of getting married if that marriage is going to erode or erase your love? You get what I mean? So in this study, actually what they did was they interviewed a lot of people, a lot of married couples who have been married for more than 30 years, more than 40 years. And to their surprise, they found that there were couples of them who have been married for decades, not just less than 10 years, for decades. That means the ages of our parents. I'm already 52, going to be 53 this year. People who are already in their 70s, in their 80s. And there is so much love between this couple, the husband and the wife, despite their age. And it's not just the kind of love where I described to you, where you do something, It's not that companionate kind of love, but rather it's romantic love where you feel a strong attraction for your spouse. What do I mean by that? For instance, when a husband calls the wife, and the wife hears the husband's voice, she feels the excitement, that flutter in her heart, just like when maybe you can recall those days when you're teenagers and you like somebody, the sound of his voice will make your heart goes boom, 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 excited and this and that. So these couples actually experience that kind of physiological reaction. Yeah. In the medical world, we actually refer to that physiological reaction, and it's their husbands and their wives. So that means that these are the couples where, to them, meeting their spouses at the end of the day is a highlight in their day. Yeah. Compare that to marriages where it's kind of a humdrum where you feel that it's mundane, and sometimes, especially for us women, since we're all women here, for some women, for some wives, they feel like having the spouse, having the husband is like another burden. It's not something that you look forward to. You don't really look forward to see your husband, your spouse at the end of the day. All right. So the question now becomes, if it is true that you can actually grow romantic love in your marriage, what else we hear about it in the papers? The answer is quite easy, because it doesn't make news. This is not really exciting news for people out there actually. We don't really hear in the media about people who have been married for many, many years. What we see in the papers, in the media, online or otherwise, in the printed media, are people who go for divorce. That seems to be the in thing and the accepted thing. And the more, socially, our community accepts that, it has become a norm. Yeah, it's not anything new anymore. Yeah, so divorce is becoming more and more. There is no, how shall I say, it's not a big deal anymore, right? And at the same time, there is no real media that actually highlights this point, this research, and there are a lot of them that actually proves that no matter how long you have been married, you can actually keep that love alive between you and your spouse. Now we are talking about kindness, so the angle where I came from is that I also researched about how kindness have an impact on marriage. And this is just one of the research that I came across. It's titled How Kindness and Generosity Affect Marital Happiness. Generosity in Malay we say is kebaikan. Right? It was done by the University of Virginia. Almost 3,000 people participated in this study, 2,870 men and women. Now the interesting thing is that they discovered when a spouse, either a man or a woman, the husband or the wife, is generous towards towards the spouse, towards the husband or the wife, it's the feeling, it's the happiness that comes out of being generous. And we are not here. It's very important to qualify what do you mean by generous. It's the little things that you do every day. What do I mean by that? For instance, making coffee or washing the dishes, for instance, yeah? These days, the men do it too. So it could be other gender, the husband or the wife. The little things that you do, we always think, if we were to do it, we always think that we have to do it. But if you were to realize that actually it's not just you helping the other person, emotionally, it leaves your own feelings about the whole situation of you living with the other person. That means they did some measurement in terms of your emotional well-being. Every time when you are generous towards your spouse, either your husband or your wife, it lifts your mood. It makes you happier, right? So yeah, and of course, when you are happier, the way you deal with your spouse and your children, how you interact with them, you become more positive. And in the long term, although those things seem to be very, very small, it actually counts, because little things mean a lot in the long run. It's incremental. Okay. Now let us look at this, the 5 stages of marriage. Where are you now? How many of you have actually read a book on marriage? Anybody? Nobody? You have never touched a book on marriage. Okay. I've read other books on marriage, and different books actually gave different stages of marriage. Some books would define it as 3 stages. Some other books define it as 9 stages. And in my book, The Kindness Miracle, I actually outline 5 stages. Having said that, it doesn't really matter which book you read. What I want to emphasize here is that in any marriage, there will be stages. And what do I mean by that? It's like seasons. Seasons on earth where there are certain things that you expect that is going to happen in a marriage, right? Now, we shall start with the first stage, which is the honeymoon stage. Now, the honeymoon stage normally happens to newlywed couples. And what happens is that the human brain, our brain, when we first get married, it has natural chemicals. Allah memang jadikan in such a way that you feel a very strong physical and emotional reaction towards your spouse. Now, why does that happen? It's actually not really within our control. You know, it's the way Allah has created us. I can't help thinking that if Allah has not created the chemicals in our brain, you know, a lot of these feelings like you feel like you're on cloud 9 and everything that your spouse does seems like perfect, right? Maybe if Allah has not created that, it is possible that we'll never get married. It is possible because what you will see is the shortcomings, the kekurangan, you know, the limitations of your spouse. And this feeling happens even before marriage, yeah, before the nikah itself. So it is possible that you're aware of the limitations of the shortcomings of your spouse to be, and after marriage, your spouse, but it's kind of like, you know, it's there, but you minimize it. And on the other hand, you tend to maximize or pay more attention to the good things that he or she does. Now, over time, however, these brain chemicals drops. Yeah? Naturally, your brain will reduce less and less of this chemical until to the point where it's quite low here, and you'll begin to discover. You'll see the y-axis. This is the emotions, the love emotions, low to high, and on the x-axis is the time, right? So first you have honeymoon, and then it comes down. This is the turning point. What happens here? The discovery stage. It is not that you are different persons. It's just that you begin to notice different things. Yeah. Let me give you an example. For instance, for us human, maybe we begin to realize that our husbands just cannot find the butter, for instance. You know, despite your husband cannot find the butter, despite you telling him the butter is right there, but he just can't seem to find it, right? Or maybe he likes to put his trousers anywhere in the house. But the thing is that, why are you noticing it now? Whereas he has been doing the same thing before. You see, it's because of the chemicals in the brain. Okay. Now, if you, sorry about that. Okay, back to here. If you are able to make adjustments, then the love will go up, right? The love will go up all the way, and then you will begin to accept each other as husband and wife. And inshallah, that's how you will get to the everlasting love, just like the couples that I described just now. However, if you are not able to, after this discovery stage, which is actually the turning point, if you're not able to make the adjustments, then this is where cracks and separation will appear. Now, we are talking about love in a marriage, all right? There are certain needs that I need to describe here. The first one is that you have to be perfect to be loved, to love and be loved. Is that true? Do you think that's true? You know what? When you look around yourselves, you might know at least 1 or 2 couples whom you know really respect and love one another, right? Do you think that the husband looks like Mr. Universe and the wife looks like Miss Universe? Did you know that some of the happiest married couples, the husband might have a balding head, or the wife might be going some menopausal symptoms? you know, what we see sometimes from the media and such, we think that you have got to look a certain way to be happy in your marriage. So that is not true at all. Yeah, that is not true at all. At the end of the day, the quality of your relationship is how you look after yourself and how you are able to grow. Yeah, how you treat each other. Now, I want to mention something about distancing. Have you heard of this word before? Distancing. What does distancing mean? Distancing means you feel like you are not really. Yes. When distancing happens, it means that you are growing apart. You are drifting apart. Now, will this happen to a marriage? It will. It will. It happens to all marriages actually, especially for us who have been married for many years. Yeah. And by the way, you know, it is really good if you learn about this before you get married. Yeah, that's the ideal time for you to learn about this. Yeah, because the thing is that if you don't know about these stages and you have a strong attraction to your spouse before you got married and soon after you get married, and after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you begin to experience distancing where you feel like you are drifting apart from your spouse. You begin to wonder, is this normal? Or what is really happening here? You know, so these are the little things that can actually influence the quality of your marriage. All right. Now, sources of distancing. Now let's go over that one by one. Of course, this list is not exhaustive. Now, the first one is personality trait. Personality trait is the way. Okay, personality is a very wide, you know, that I mean, if you look at books, different books define personality in different ways. But what I want to say is that there are certain common traits that can actually create challenges between the husband and the wife. For example, yeah, introvert and extrovert. There is a likelihood for a person who is an introvert to marry an extrovert because opposites attract. But that doesn't mean that introvert must marry an extrovert. There are cases where introverts marry introverts and extroverts marry extroverts, right? But let's just give an example. If you are an introvert, you are very quiet, and you marry an extrovert, somebody who seems to be loud. Do you know the difference between introvert and extrovert? What actually sets them apart? In what ways are they unlike? Can somebody give an example? What do you understand? The difference between introvert and extrovert? Socially, in what way? Sociable. An extrovert is sociable, right? Okay, sociable. An introvert is somebody who keeps to himself or herself. That is true. And one important distinction between introvert and extrovert is how they recharge themselves. Because an introvert, yes, communication is one, the way they carry themselves, and equally important is for an introvert, different things cause a different experience for him or her. Let me give you an example. An introvert likes to keep to herself, right? What does that mean? She gains energy by just being alone. It doesn't mean that she's lonely, she just loves to be alone. Alright? An extrovert, on the other hand, gains energy when he or she is around people. So what are the implications? If you are an introvert and you marry an extrovert, your extrovert husband likes to be around with people. And you, if you're an introvert, you like to be at home or at the library, places where you can be alone. Not lonely, but alone, right? But when you're married, of course, your husband wants to bring you to places where there are people, right? If he's an extreme extrovert, say he's an extreme extrovert, you're an extreme introvert. And it's not that you don't really like these things. It's just that the amount of stimulation that you get from being with people, with all the noise and talking and all that might actually overwhelm you. But for your spouse, It's something that he looks forward to. So you just imagine, worst case scenario, you are the only child and you're introvert. You're coming from a family of introverts and you're the only child. And you marry an extrovert who comes from a big family of 10 children, 10 siblings. So what does that mean? You are used to being alone, right? Alone time. And your spouse has a big family who has to see each other every weekend. How would that make you feel, right? So these are very real life situations where spouses, if they don't know, the implications of these personality traits, it can actually cause misunderstandings and conflict. So you have stories like, she doesn't she just doesn't like my family, because we are loud and this and that. You have to understand that for an introvert, it's not a matter of liking, it's a matter of real physical discomfort. For introverts, when they are around people too much, they actually feel overwhelmed, they become tired, and they cannot stand the noise, and all these are actually characteristics of introverts. For the extroverts, it's the opposite. When it's too quiet for a long time, they cannot stand it. Okay, so how do you go over this? How do you go over this hump, this challenge? You acknowledge that your spouse is different. In Malay, we don't say that. It's when they say that they can't stand it, it's not mengada-gada. They're not making it up. They just feel real uncomfortable. So you acknowledge that the differences are real, and you accept it, and you compromise. Maybe on some days when, if you're the extrovert and you need to see your family, maybe you can reduce the days, the number of hours. So you might have to see less of your family. For instance, this is an example, right? Because you have to remember that when we marry, we complement each other, no matter how different you are in the first place in terms of personality traits. So what I want you to remember is that differences actually enrich the relationship. Yeah, you may feel you are so different, but in the first place, that's why you are attracted to each other, isn't it? So it could become a matter of contention, it could become a source of conflict, but it could also become a point where you look for sports or opportunities where you could work together. Okay? Now, money, children, household chores, assistant mom, and they do that. What I mean by that is that, number two, look at money. When you first get married, you are just starting, and you tend to spend less time with each other. So that could actually threaten your relationship. Did you know that if you are married and you spend just 30 minutes with your spouse every day, not necessarily talking about the children, just between you and your spouse, just probably holding hands together and having some tea together and talking about your shared dreams, what you hope to achieve in the long term, that actually can grow your relationship. Right? So don't get distracted with whatever is in the house. Just sitting together for 30 minutes. That can make a real difference to your marriage. Any questions so far? Sure? Are you okay with the pace? Okay. Now, okay, children, because we are all women here, I just want to say that sometimes once we have children, and this is true for many mothers, we tend to pay a lot of attention to our children. And it might slip our minds that our number one priority is the husband, not the children. The children, yes, they are important, but they are second. They're important, but they're still second. Maybe you can pay a lot of attention to them. Most of the time, sometimes emergencies and children get sick and all and that. Those are the moments when you really have to pay more attention to them. But if you give more and more attention to the extent that you actually neglect your spouse, that is not the right thing to do. Okay? Always remember that the quality of the relationship between us and our spouse, that has a very big impact on how well we parent. If we look at children who come from stable families, Stable families, children who come from stable families, they feel very secure. And it affects their academic performance and whatever comes after that in their life. So always remember that how you treat each other actually affects the well-being of your children. Okay? Now, item number 4 is household chores, assistant mom and deputy dad. Can you suggest what is the issue there? What would be a possible issue there? Some of us are perfectionists, isn't it? And sometimes when it comes to men, it's not that they don't like to help. A common complaint amongst wives is that the fathers, they don't like to help when their children have arrived. I see more and more fathers helping their wives these days, and it is actually a healthy phenomenon. But having said that, sometimes there are cases where the husbands try to help, but it's not as per our expectations. Now the issue is, when it's not up to your expectations, because we all have our SOP. You know what SOP is? Standard operating procedure. Certain things must be done in certain way. And sometimes you might unwittingly make comments, throw in comments that are not really positive to the spouse, which might not be taken positively. So at the end of the day, the man throw in the towel and say, well, if I can't do it as well as you do, you might as well do everything yourself. Okay? So remember that when the children deal with when our spouse, when the husband deal with the children, with your children, they bring other things as well, right? They bring other things which we cannot do. You try to see it as something more than just cleaning the house or taking care of the children, because from the little interactions that the children have experienced with their dads, the dads will give them something else that we cannot. And the same thing when mothers interact with their children, with their young children, they give something that the fathers cannot do. You see, by virtue of being a mother, by virtue of being a woman. So we need to recognize and be aware of the differences. What extra things, and not only extra, the essential things that the fathers can do. Okay. Now, couple time versus family time, I have already mentioned that. In-laws and early years, and this is for anybody has experienced not so positive things with their in-laws? Alhamdulillah, there is this a story that I read about an Asian lady who married into a German family, and she was always wondering why every time she goes to the kitchen, the in-laws would shut the door. So after a few years, out of curiosity, she asked her mother-in-law why people were actually closing the door, because she thought that they did that because they didn't want to intrude her in the conversation. And the mother-in-law said, we always do that because back in Germany, if you don't close the door, the heat will escape from the kitchen. That's all. It has nothing to do with her. So sometimes, in marriage and dealing with your in-laws, it's so important to have good and positive thoughts. Yeah, because sometimes it's just nothing. It's nothing but because of the negativity that we have, sangka-sangka, kan? The negative thoughts, it actually brings other negative thoughts, and nothing becomes something. And before you know it, it has already developed into a negative relationship that you wanted to avoid from the start. Now, let us look at this. This is from the book by Dr. Willard Harvey Jr., who is also a consultant for marriage. Yeah, I find that this is very relevant because when you look at the list, his needs, her needs, not in order of importance. There are 11 items stated here, and what Dr. Willard Harley did was, he did research with many couples, and he asked these people, the husband and the wife, to actually list their top 3 or top 5 items. And these couples found that between the husband and the wife, almost always there would be differences. And what does it mean by that? What are the implications? You see, we care for each other as husband and wife. Okay? We really care about each other. But it's just that sometimes when we don't know what actually is important for our spouse, we might be expressing our love in a way that the other party cannot appreciate. Right? So what is important to us? My husband and I actually did a course in Oman. Um, yes, in Oman on the parenting course, but we began with the marriage course, and we asked the participants to actually list one thing which each of them consider is the most important thing, and it was actually very different from person to person, right? So what you do is, if you have this list, in fact, you can actually Google Dr. Willard Harvey to see um, the list of things, his needs, her needs, and then it's good for you to sit down with your spouse and to compare. Yeah, what is important for you? What is important for your spouse? It is very likely that what's important for you is different from your spouse. And it's also good to be honest to ask, am I actually fulfilling your need this way or that way? You know, which is what is important for you. Am I really paying attention to your needs in the first place? You see, sometimes we have conceptions, yeah? We have conceptions about men, and men also have conceptions about women that might not be true. For instance, it is true that some women love shopping, but do all women love shopping? I don't. I'm not into shopping. And one of the misconceptions about men is that a lot of people would say that all men care about is sex. Is that true about all men? Maybe that's important for them, but that doesn't mean that that is the only thing that they care about. You see? So, things like affection, a conversation might matter to them just as much. Right? So this is like going into a deeper level and trying to understand how we as a spouse, we might not be doing justice to our spouse. Okay, so it's good to actually sit down with your spouse and go through this list. Now, this is a group work that's supposed to be done in a group, but since you're very small, or there are only 4 of us here, so probably, like I said, maybe when you go home and you can list the top 5 needs, or even 3 or 5 of the top needs, and then discuss with your spouse. It's for those of you who are not married, or even those of you who are married, you can actually Google Dr. Willard Harvey Marriage Builders. It's listed in this website. Okay, this is a role play. Would you like to do this role play? This is a real life situation. I thought it would be fun. Can I ask the 2 young ladies to do this role play? Yeah. I'll tell you why it's important to do this afterwards. Yeah. Amna and Yusuf, husband and wife, are on a shopping trip together with their kids. They have 2 kids, Safia, age 3, and Zaid, 5. They enter a store, and half an hour later, they realize that Zaid is not with them. Would you step forward, Dr. Wan and Nadia, and see how you would respond to this situation? Sorry? It's okay. It's okay. Just imagine that it's true. This happens to a lot of families actually when we do it, when my husband and I do it with couples, with young couples. It's funny, the stories that they share with us, and at least a few couples will actually raise their hand and say, this is exactly what happened to us. This is important for you to identify how you play roles when you're in a conflict. Would you like to do it? No? Okay, no, okay. All right, then we'll move on, okay? Now, the reason why I raised that issue is because how we respond to conflict differs from person to person. Okay. Now let me tell you this story. But it doesn't show. The story doesn't show it. Can you see it right here? Oh, okay, right. When I was researching for the book, The Kindness Miracle, I actually interviewed many men and women. Okay, apart from finding research that has been documented, I actually talked to many men and women who were willing to share their personal stories, what worked and what didn't work in their marriage. And there was this man who shared with me that he was married. He was married before he met his current wife. Okay? So I asked him what actually caused the divorce, and he said it's the way, it's how his former wife dealt with conflict. Now, what happens is that they had a very short get to know period before they got married, and he discovered that his wife, his first wife, had this habit of not talking to him whenever there's something that she's unhappy about. But he didn't think that it was something very serious, right? So after they got married, it got worse and worse to the point that whenever something upset her, she would avoid talking to him. And she would remain quiet for days on end and would only say something whenever she felt like she was ready to talk to him. So how did they communicate in those days? By SMS, by messages, right? Do you get what I mean? This is what we call the silent treatment, meaning she was not able to communicate, to express her thoughts, whatever upset she is. So you can imagine, as a husband, what he was experiencing was that he wouldn't know what situation or what mood she would be in, what mood the wife would be in whenever he comes home from work or wherever he comes, from a meeting or something like that. So if he's lucky, she would be happy and smiling. And if not, on the days that she doesn't feel right, she would refuse to greet him to that extent. And he said he would have no idea what actually upset her because she would just stay silent. She didn't know if it was his fault. He didn't know whether it was his fault. He didn't know whether it was somebody else's fault because she refused to talk, to divulge more information. And they agreed to talk to her parents to see how they could move forward. But all the parents said was that that's how she was. Even when she was little, when she's upset, she would withdraw and she would keep to herself. Okay? And in less than 3 years, they actually parted ways. It's sad, isn't it? When you think about how, if the wife had known a better way how to deal with conflict, the marriage could have been saved. Don't you think so? And this is something that is quite common, especially amongst us women. In our culture, when we're upset, in the Asian culture, when we're upset, we might keep things to ourselves and we might not even say a word to our husband. Yeah? And the question is, it's something that causes a lot of discomfort to the spouse. Okay? Now, if you look at this chart, if you look at this graph here, what is the main idea that I want to highlight here? Conflict transformation. The word conflict itself for many of us, when we talk about conflict, when we hear the word conflict, we always think of it as something very negative, something that makes us nervous, something that we want to avoid in the first place. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it is possible to transform conflict into something that is positive. It can actually help you and your spouse to understand each other better. And have you ever thought that it would be possible that with the conflict, before the conflict, you love each other this much, and after the conflict, because you are able to deal with the conflict positively, your love and appreciation for each other could be even better than before the conflict. Do you think that's possible? Yeah, it is very possible. That's why we call it conflict transformation. Now, we look at the ways how our personal styles dealing with conflict transformation. Look at the shark. What does the animal shark tell you? Very aggressive, isn't it? Loves to dominate, always want to win. Yeah. So that is how, you might have seen yourself relationships among your relatives, or even among your friends, where one spouse is so bent on winning every single argument. But you have to realize that in a marriage is not about win or lose. You actually are on the same team together, the husband and the wife. Okay? There are certain things that you cannot achieve yourself. You need your husband and your husband needs you. Okay? So that's where dominate, win, lose, directive for change. Now the second one, let's go to the bottom there. That's withdrawal, lose, lose. Is that a tortoise? Do you see a tortoise there? Okay. Now, what does that mean? The story that I told you about, the man who always was given the silent treatment by the wife, that is withdrawal. Okay. And next to withdrawal, next to the tortoise is a fox. A fox is about compromising. Compromising, you lose some, I win some. Okay? Both settle for less. Now, the fourth one is accommodate or submit. Lose, win. That means one person gets everything, the other person lose everything. What is the difference between withdrawal, no, it's not the tortoise, it's the turtle actually. What is the difference between the turtle and the teddy bear? The teddy bear is someone who submits and accommodates everything.
The issue is addressed.
Sorry?
The issue is addressed.
The issue is addressed where?
The issue is
Not really. Submit it, yes. In the case of the turtle, normally it gets ignored completely. Yes, you have a point there. In the case of the teddy bear, there is still a possibility that the issue is addressed. That's true. Because there might be a situation where the argument gets so heated up that you just choose to submit, for instance, okay? Or to accommodate the other party. Okay. And the other one there is the owl. Owl means you choose to collaborate, win-win. Okay. Now, what is the best style of dealing with conflict? What is the best way of dealing with conflict? Is there any good way?
the honest talk to one another.
Talk to one another. But if we were to look at this, the methods, yes, collaborate. But actually the truth is that there is no one best way, because it depends on the situation at the end of the day. Yeah, there might be times when, like I said, things get so heated up. The wise thing to do is just to accommodate at that moment. But we are not talking about a relationship where one spouse is abusive and all that. We are not talking about that. For instance, the spouse is hitting one another. We are not talking about that. Over here, we are only talking about a normal relationship. Yeah. Because if you were to experience abuse at the hands of your spouse, then you probably need outside help. It's really not something that you can resolve yourself. That's a different matter altogether. Right? So remember, there will be times when it's good for you to play the role of a shark. Sometimes, sometimes, I'm not saying always. There might be a time when you need to play the role of a fox. Sometimes it's wise for you to play the role of a turtle. You see? But of course, there might be a lot of times when you need to collaborate. Yeah? That is the ideal sometimes, not always. Get it? Okay, this was for the role play which we didn't want to do just now. Okay. Any questions so far? No questions. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes.
What if only the wife or only the husband who always choose to be the loser?
Choose to be the loser. There is a
always accommodate so that the other partner will always win.
yeah. There is a danger of that person who seemed to be accommodating for a long time to actually explode one day. And that actually caused a huge damage on the relationship. Have you heard of the concept EBA, emotional bank account? Now, the concept of emotional bank account is very similar to a physical bank account where every time you go to the bank, you will deposit some money. Okay? If you go to the bank, you wanted to uh, grow your bank account, you'll bring some money and make deposits, right? But what do you do when you need some money? You go to the bank and you take out some money, you make withdrawal. Okay, you make a withdrawal. Now, what happens to the bank balance when you make deposits? It grows. When you make a withdrawal, you keluarkan duit. Yes, the bank balance drops. Now, the EBA, the emotional bank account, is very similar in the sense that when you do good things, when you are being kind and generous to your spouse, yeah, you are making a withdrawal or a deposit. Do you make a withdrawal or a deposit? You are making a deposit, okay? When you do things that hurt your spouse and that's offensive to him, maybe some hurtful words, some cynical words, is that a withdrawal or deposit? It's a withdrawal. Now, based on your everyday interactions with your spouse, the EBA, the balance in your emotional bank account, it either grows or drops. Yes, the balance, okay? What happens in the relationship of my friend that I told you before, early on in this program, where they grew apart, they drifted apart, so much so that they hated each other. What do you think happened in that relationship? A lot of withdrawals have been made by both parties, actually, and to the extent that it becomes negative. Nothing is left. You see? In fact, this is a very simple concept which is true of any relationship. It could be your parents, it's not just your spouse, even your siblings for that matter. You know? Do you know that some siblings, they're not even able to face one another? Why? Because the balance is already negative. You know, throwing negative remarks to each other and not respecting each other, maybe especially the eldest and the younger ones. For instance, sometimes in a family, the eldest tend to feel that he or she has certain rights over the rest, you know. So over time, the sibling relationship sours. So this is exactly what happens with the emotional bank account. And how do we grow? The best way to grow the EBA is through kindness. Okay, little acts of kindness. When we talk about kindness, it doesn't have to be one big major deposit. It's the little things. So what is different between the emotional bank account and the physical bank account that we have in the banks? In a physical bank account, you can actually see the balance, right? You can see the numbers. But when it comes to the emotional bank account, you do not see it actually. So you don't really know how much, how big or how small your balance is. But you can have a good feeling. Yeah, you could tell by the warmth that you feel when you talk to your spouse. You could see that, isn't it? When you feel very warm towards each other, that is indicative that your bank balance is high. But there will be times, there might be times when you feel like avoiding your spouse. It could be that your bank balance or EBA, your emotional bank account is very, very low. Okay? This is a very simple concept to understand. Okay? And not just, like I said, it's not just for the sake of understanding the relationship between you and your spouse, it's your relationship with everybody else. We often hear about people who, the husband and the wife, they go separate ways because of irreconcilable differences. We often hear irreconcilable differences. But what we mean by differences, now, first of all, it's good to remember that differences are not equal to incompatibility. It's different. You see, just because you are different doesn't mean that you are incompatible. Now, there was this story of a man meeting a wise man. And the man says to the wise man that I have fallen out of love with my spouse. And the wise man said, love her. And the man said, how do I love her? I've already fallen out of love with her. And the wise man said, I'm not talking about love as the emotion. I'm talking about love as a verb. That means kata kerja. What do I mean by that? When we talk about love, we always think that it's an emotion that comes by itself. But the opposite is also true. That means if you feel that the love is not really there, when you do acts of love, acts of kindness, that by itself is good enough to grow the love. That means acts of kindness can actually increase the love between you and your spouse. Now back to your question, what if one person only does it? Inshallah, it's going to help. Because at the end of the day, maybe we are the only one who understands about this concept. Maybe the other spouse doesn't understand, and that's fine really, because the other person, your spouse, actually responds to how you behave, the way you talk. It is very, very possible that by you saying things in a different way, doing things in a more positive way, it will inspire your spouse to act differently, as in more positively. Okay? Because one of the issues that we have is that why should I start? Because how could I make this a success if the other party doesn't really put effort into it? Well, why don't you just try? Because it is very likely that your words and actions can inspire your spouse to do something else, yeah, uncharacteristic of him, which is more positive. Okay, now this is a little takeaway activity before we end this session. The singles, we have one single here. What simple act, now this is futuristic thinking, right? What simple act of kindness can I offer to my future spouse to make us keep falling in love every day? Now, this is something that I should have mentioned. Love, when I talk about love in a marriage, this is an aspiration that we should try to realize. What I mean by this is that it is something that we can make a reality. This concept of us and our spouse falling in love with each other every day. Okay? It's so easy to actually treat our spouse just to take him or her for granted. It's so easy because you feel like, okay, now we are married. You are supposed to treat me in a special way, and I mean, if you don't make it happen, who will? There are only the two of us, isn't it? You and your spouse, the two of you. Without effort, how is it going to go? Okay. And for the marrieds, there are 3 marrieds here. Send a simple WhatsApp message that can enhance the love. Are you all on WhatsApp? Okay, can you do that? Okay. I'm giving you 30 seconds, yeah, to do that. And see if there is any response from the other party. Okay, with that, thank you very much for joining us. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. No more recording, right? Mike, tak record kan? Still recording?
Yes.
What's it? Questions? Oh. I'm still going to record a questions and answers session. Is there any questions for everybody for that matter?
Stop broadcasting.